How's everyone? I'm just on a course at the moment, but this week I've got an interview for everyone from a guy called Scott that flies for the Great Michigan Bush Company. They've got a very cool YouTube channel, and I'll link the YouTube channel down below.
Scooter with the Great Michigan Bush Company here. Sorry it took so long to get back to you, Patty. But here's the questions you wanted answered. And we'll start out with the first one. Lightspeed, Bose, or David Clark? You start out with a really good question. Bose right now. I use Bose. I love Bose. The noise canceling is fantastic. I wish they were as rugged as David Clark. The David Clarks I've had for 30 years and they still last. I've never had to send them back to David Clark, versus my Bose have been back 3 times. The Bose are so comfortable, so light, and just you live in perfect silence. I love them. And the next question, steam gauges or glass cockpit? Well, I'm a steam gauge pilot from the beginning. I learned my instrument on steam gauges. I learned my private on steam gauges. I multi on steam gauges, multi in Apache. My Stinson and Cessna both have steam gauges. But I put the piece of glass from Avionics, the AV30, in my Stinson, and I like it. I can't knock it. The weight of the glass is great. It reduces weight. I see no advantage as far as being electronic over analog, except the electronic is obviously more reliable. So I love the nostalgia of the steam. I like the ease and weight, and how robust the glass cockpits are. Good questions. What's your name and total number of hours? And well, my name is Scott. I'm known online as Scooter Stinson at the Great Michigan Bush Company. You can find us on YouTube. I have about 10,000 hours in flying time. Of that, 8,000 hours would be in general aviation aircraft, and then about 3,000 in multi-engine aircraft. Some turbine time. I don't like talking about the turbine time. I'm a general aviation pilot. Okay, the next question. What aircraft did you do most of your flying in, and what's your favorite aircraft? Well, most of my flying has been done in a Super Cub. I still believe it's a Super Cub. I've had about 4,000 hours in Super Cubs, and the Super Cub is my favorite airplane. Piper got the airframe and wing combination right early, then added the flaps and made it even better, and then added more horsepower. And what can be wrong with more horsepower? Super Cub's fantastic. The one I flew was 180 horsepower. I did work in it. I did banner towing, and it handles docilely. It's perfection in an airplane. Short takeoff, short landing, weight and balance. While I would never fly it over gross, I'm sure it's just a function of volume. Great question. I love it. I want a Super Cub. I've got a Stinson. I do like the Stinson. How did you get into bush flying, and how do you manage to keep paying to fly for fun? Well, I got into bush flying really by flying the Super Cub and by flying a Scout. There was a couple guys who've inspired me. There's a guy named Pete who taught me how to land short. When you start doing short takeoffs and short landings, it just leads its way to bush flying. It's the only place where it makes sense to keep doing short takeoffs and short landings, and where you can practice and really make your skills happen. I keep paying for it because I'm a professional pilot. I fly for a living, and that's the only job that I've found that can allow me to continue flying for fun. I tell people I'm a wannabe bush pilot on the weekends who flies in the weekdays to support it. Where is one of the most challenging places you've flown in your aircraft or someone else's? One of the most challenging places I've flown would have been, in the mountains just east of San Diego. Probably Warner Springs. I flew a glider up there, And you would get into the thermals and climb up to the mountain wave and then make it up to 8,000-9,000 feet. And it's just one of those situations in flying where you're in a flow. And you can't stop thinking about being in the air, because the moment you stop thinking about being in the air, you start descending. And I think that's part of the fun of soaring, and why it was challenging, is because you could never stop flying the airplane. I had a similar experience once in the Everglades. I flew to the bottom of the clouds and looked up and saw the buzzards flying IFR. All right, so this is I can choose a question I want to answer here. So this is going to be good. Let's see, the 3 questions are: have you made any recent purchases for your aircraft that have positively affected your flying experience? Or what is one purchase that you have made in the last 12 months that has positively affected your life? It can be anything from an app to shoelaces, doesn't have to be aviation specific. In the last 12 months, something that I've purchased that has changed my life is the flight helmet. I just did a review on it. And I think for someone flying short takeoff and landing in contests, or someone flying off-field for fun, that the helmet adds a level of protection that you don't understand until you put the helmet on. People are out there making fun of me for this flight helmet I'm wearing. Why are you wearing a helmet in an airplane? I put it on. It makes sense. What is one piece of advice you would give a new pilot wanting to start doing the type of flying you're doing? Get flight instruction. That's probably the best thing you can do, and fly often. Find someone who knows how to land short, and find someone who has experience flying, to uncharted or off-field flying. Have them take you in to some of the strips and show you how to do it, and then practice consistently. You can't keep up with the level of flying needed to fly uncharted and off airport without doing it all the time. Every landing of mine is a spot landing, and nearly every landing of mine is a short landing. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. Would you suggest making aviation a career or just a hobby, and making your money somewhere else to support your hobby? I chose to make aviation a career so that I could have aviation as a hobby. It was the only way I could find the means to have my own airplane. And I enjoy my job. Like every job, it has its ups and its downs. It has its good days, it has its bad days. It's definitely work, but it's different. It would be like a commercial fisherman and someone who fishes as a hobby. If you got off the big commercial fishing boat, it's not the same as then going to a river with a fly rod and going trout fishing. They're completely different. So I know there's people who will say that, a career flying will ruin flying for you. Only if you choose, because career flying is so much different than hobby flying. It shouldn't ruin general aviation for you. Would I choose general aviation as my job? Yeah. I flew, as I say, thousands of hours in a Super Cub towing a banner. It was good. Never regretted it one bit. Enjoyed it, and I'm glad that was part of the career experience I had. What is one of your favorite stories that sticks out in your flying so far? The longer the story, the better. My first engine out, I was flying skydivers, and on our climb out, I started to smell something funny in the cockpit, and then I looked over at the oil temperature indicator, and it was full red. It couldn't go any further. It was beyond the red. Startled, I looked out the side window. It had a photography window that was a bubble, so you could actually get your head outside the fuselage. And out of the tailpipe, I see what looks to be a smoke machine behind me. And I knew my time in the air was limited. So I tapped my the jump master, who was a friend of mine. And he looked at me, and I said, "You gotta go now." And his eyes got really big, And he says, "Now?" And I said, "You got to go now." And he yells door. And as he's jumping out of the airplane, he looks at me and says, "Good luck," and bails. Now behind him was another tandem jumper. And then we had a fun jumper in the back of it. We were flying in a 206, so we had five people in the 206. The other two weren't ready for this at all. And we were flying away from the airport, and I had slowed down to a jump speed so they could jump out. And I could get them out of the airplane before I had to return back to the field. At this point, I knew I could make the field. They weren't moving forward. So at this point, I started to get a little worked up, and I told them, "Get out now." And the student, the tandem student, starts crawling toward the door, not harnessed in. He's going to jump out of the airplane without a parachute on. I see the tandem master grab his shoulders, and reaches up and clips him in, and he jumps. And then the fun jumper was ready to go. He didn't have to do anything. He just jumped out of the aircraft. We were so far from the airport that the tandem didn't make the airport. The fun jumper didn't make the airport. After that, it all worked out. I was able to come back around, and I glided the aircraft to the field. I was talking to a control center, and I told him I'm returning to Maple Grove. And he said, "Is there an emergency?" I said, "No, I just had an engine out, and I need to glide to the field." And he starts sterilizing the area, telling aircraft in the area to turn away from me. And I said, "I'm not declaring an emergency." I said, I have the airport made. He said, "No, I'm declaring that emergency for you. And we'll need you to call me on the ground." And obviously it's going well because I'm able to have this conversation. And then I glided in and put it on the field. And I remember that feeling as your mains touch down, and about that point, the airplane stops windmilling and the propeller completely stops and it rolls. And then you don't have any power. You're just stuck with the airplane in the middle of the runway, and you walk away from it and try to figure out how you can get the airplane off the runway. But that was my first engine out, my first forced landing. I've had a couple since. Those stories aren't as much fun. This was a fun story. It worked out well. The airplane was flying a week later when a new engine was put back on it. What is your favorite aviation movie, series, book, podcast that you would suggest people listen to? Well, a series. The favorite series I've ever watched was From the Earth to the Moon. Just love the way they showed all sides of that grand adventure. Our adventure to the moon is the best adventure man has ever been on. 12 people got to step foot on the moon because of a nation's work, a world's work. And they were all, well, not all. The first ones were all pilots, and good pilots, engineers. My favorite aviation book, I think, is A Flight of Passage. Two boys cross the country in a Cub. It's beautiful. It inspired me to want to cross the country in a Cub. Do you have anything else I'd like to add? Well, yeah, I do. I want to see people get out and fly general aviation aircraft. I believe that general aviation is no longer a viable means of travel. Commercial aviation is so cheap and so readily available and so seamless. You get in the airplane, you fly to where you're going, they ship you off to the rent-a-cars, you have a car. It's really difficult for anything but the fastest small aircraft to get you anywhere, and the means at which it takes to use a Cirrus or even a Bonanza to fly isn't available for the average aviator. So then we come down to planes like Stinsons and Kit Foxes and Super Cubs and Piper Cubs. These allow you to go places that you can't get by car or by boat or by train. You have to fly there or you have to hike there. And that's why these aircraft are so great, is they open up a world that you wouldn't have available to you. And if we're going to keep aviation alive, I believe it's in the sporting format. I believe it's in using aircraft as a means of fun, as a lifestyle, and a means of adventure. And I believe we can do that safely with good training and good aircraft and people who participate in this taking it seriously. And that's why we have the Great Michigan Bush Company. It is to promote that type of aviation and try to get people interested in general aviation and small airplanes once again, while doing it safely. I don't want to see aviation die. It's my life's passion. I started flying when I was 15 years old, and I'll fly till they tell me I'm not allowed to fly any longer.
Thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you enjoy this type of interview, and I'll try to get some more pilots on to do it.